Hello, everybody. Welcome. We get started in a second. Know a ton of folks are joining. Very excited to have you today. We'll get started here in 1 second. Hello to everybody that's joining. Still getting a lot of folks joining, so we're going to give 1 more minute as more folks can join, and we'll get started here in a second. If you could, just as a test, put up a raised hand if you can hear me. Thank you. That's a lot of raised hands. Wait, okay, class, we can put them down. Okay, everybody, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today, and thank you for being in education at this time. It's such a critical time, such a crazy and different time, and we're just thrilled that you have chosen to spend some time out of your incredibly busy day to spend with us. And our hope is that in turn we can deliver an excellent tool and resource that helps save you time and energy and some of this stress. My name is Andrew Hodge. I'm the Director of Innovative Instructional Models at Texas Education Agency, and I work a lot on the Texas Home Learning team. As a matter of housekeeping, please note that we do have a Q&A function. We'll be answering questions over the course of this time. There's also a chat, but it's quite a bit easier for us to track and then turn around the questions in an FAQ on our website if you do submit your questions through the Q&A function. So please do that if you don't mind. And then also this webinar will be recorded and the slides will also be available for you. And those are going to be hosted on texashomelearning.org. And there's a PreK section there that we're excited to send y'all to access some of these materials. And that's where you'll be able to find this recording. So with that, I want to get started. So welcome. This is the Texas Home Learning PreK Instructional Materials Overview. I'm joined by Brian Mack at Teaching Strategies, who will take over here in a little bit and dig into the reason why y'all are all here, as well as some of my colleagues from the Office of School Programs here at Texas Education Agency. So we're thrilled again to have you. How we're going to spend the next 58 minutes or so of our time today, we're going to give an overview of Texas Home Learning in total. We're going to announce the PreK materials, and then Brian's going to take over and give kind of an overview of the materials and the instructional approach with the PreK Learning Solution for Texas that we're excited to unveil today. We'll chat a little bit about the implementation supports as well, which are so critical in implementing any high quality instructional materials. And then we'll leave you with a few next steps and give you a heads up about what is coming. So want to root in Texas Home Learning in total. So we're all here today for PreK, but Texas Home Learning is actually a comprehensive, optional, aligned suite of resources that educators can use at their will in this new learning environment. It includes 3 parts: instructional materials, technology, and professional development. But I think at the core of this, all of this is aligned to be able to support our teachers in being able to navigate this current learning environment as easily as possible in a high quality way. Again, want to be 100% clear here. This is all optional, 100% optional. It's a tool, it's a resource that's available to y'all to use as you see fit. I want to start with an overview of the technology, one of the technology supports that we're able to deliver for folks. I know this may not be relevant for all folks on the call, but it is relevant for some. So I want to just highlight that we do have an option for folks to opt into a free license for Schoology and LMS for any interested LEA in the state of Texas. That's for 2 years. It's completely free for districts. And then we have had an uptake. About 400 Texas districts so far have signed up. So quite a huge response. I know Schoology and Texas Home Learning Material, actually Texas Home Learning Materials, you absolutely do not need to use Schoology to access. It's just a tool, a separate tool that is available for y'all if you want it. So as we talk about teaching strategies going forward, Schoology is one way that you could access teaching strategies, but in addition to that, there's multiple other ways, which we'll highlight here in a minute. want to center this conversation around the instructional materials that we are developing in response to this crisis. So TEA to deliver instructional materials for the state of Texas as an option has engaged in a competitive solicitation process to gather really vendors who are interested in delivering and developing instructional materials that are built for this current learning environment. This is an unprecedented situation, unprecedented learning environment. And so we need to create a new tool that districts and teachers can use in order to ensure that kids are learning in this environment. This means they need to be flexible between in-person and remote and go in between seamlessly. This means that they need to be 100% aligned to and covering the TEKS, or in this case, the Texas Pre-K guidelines. And this means that continuous improvements are going to be made. These are materials that are not just being developed off the shelf and then they're done. We actually have a really great opportunity with all of our Texas home learning vendors to continually update and increase the effectiveness of our Texas home learning materials based on the feedback that we get from y'all, feedback we get from Texas educators. And that's a really nice thing and nice opportunity to have, especially knowing that we're in a continuously developing environment. When we talk about instructional materials with Texas home learning, we want to really align on that definition. So what we're talking about is really those 6 boxes that you see on your screen, which are everything from high-level scopes and sequences to unit plans to lessons to student materials, embedded assessments so that we can know how well our early learners are doing and know how we can best respond to their needs. We know that we need teacher and family supports that are built in, along with a digitally native yet flexible set of resources that we can deliver to our teachers and students. In addition to that, there's progress monitoring, because again, we want to know how our learners are doing, but also we want to build these tools to be adaptable and supportive for all learners. And so Brian's going to be able to talk a little bit about how the Texas Pre-K Learning Solution does that specifically. I want to be very clear. These materials, all Texas home learning materials, are designed comprehensively from a scope and sequence that is aligned to all TEKS, or in this case, Texas Pre-K guidelines. But we know that it is November, and we know that the idea of putting in a new set of instructional materials right now is a big change. So what we're asking is, hey, teachers, educators, think of this as kind of a pilot or a trial, something that you can actually say, we're going to look at this unit, especially given the issues that some teachers and districts, a lot of teachers and districts are having right now, teaching 2 different preps really with online and in person. Use this as you see fit. But again, it's all an option and it's there to support y'all in supporting your students. The materials that we have announced to date are seen on the screen. The focus of today's webinar is obviously the integrated Pre-K, the Texas Pre-K Learning Solution. But in addition to that, we have a set of math, RLA English, RLA Spanish, and science, K-5 science materials that are available for districts. All these can be found on texashomeLearning.org. And then in addition to that, we'll also have a few more materials that are headed the way of districts. All these updates will be announced on texashomeLearning.org and through our newsletter, which you can also sign up for on texashomeLearning.org. With that, super excited to announce and to really focus today on teaching strategies for Texas and the Texas Pre-K Learning Solution that we're able to offer through Texas Home Learning. So if we bring back to those 6 components that we mentioned earlier, very excited to just talk a little bit about how the Texas Pre-K Learning Solution meets those needs. So if you think about unit plans, there's teaching guides, there's daily resources that are searchable, aligned to Texas Pre-K guidelines, individual unit plans, which Brian will talk about here in a little bit, teacher and family supports. The family supports for this product are, I think back to my time as a teacher, and it just makes that connection easier on the teacher to deliver that information to the parents, because we know this is a family approach to raising our students, and I want to make sure that we're bringing along everybody. Digital access, I want to be very clear about this. I think that there's some trepidation whenever we talk about digital access and digital format for our earliest learners, and so all of these has been built in a developmentally appropriate way, which we'll see in the next few minutes. And I also want to really highlight the accessibility supports for all learners, with the PreK Learning Solution. On our website right now, there's sample materials, and you can see just the supports that are included for dual language learners and students with disabilities as well. So really want to highlight and applaud that in this product. Finally, formative and summative unit assessments, and then built-in progress monitoring that our teachers can use to make sure that our students are learning and getting what they need from class. Before we start, there's 5 kind of frequently asked questions that we've identified that have come up a few times already. So just want to make sure that we're all on the same page as we go through. So the first one is, when will materials be available to use? You can see sample materials now, but we will have a materials release webinar on the 15th of December. That's where we'll be able to show you all the suite of resources that will be available. And finally, again, another plug to sign up for our newsletter on texashomelearning.org to make sure that you're staying updated on all the updates with Texas Home Learning. How long will access to the PreK Learning Solution be for free to Texans? We're very excited it is available to all Texans for free with 3-year license. So that's through November 2023. Do want to be very transparent. After November 2023, this deal is no longer in place. And so in order to keep going, a district or an LEA or homeschool, whoever is engaging with the product, would need to continue it. Right now, we can make sure that we are continually updating y'all on prices, but that is something that that y'all would need to purchase after the end of this 3-year license. Another thing that I want to highlight is that, of course, public Texas LEAs are available to use this license, but this also applies to any kind of Head Start or preschools or private schools even that would be interested in using this product as well. What does this mean for Proclamation 2021? That's probably one of the biggest questions that we're getting right now. We want to be very clear that Proclamation 2021 is happening, and these materials are available as an option for folks. So what districts decide to do and adopt is a complete local decision. They can choose to implement some of this PreK Learning Solution. They can choose to implement all of it. They could choose to implement absolutely none of it. So again, this is all a local decision, but we want to make sure that you know, especially in this proclamation year, that this is available as a resource for you all going forward. A lot of folks, I think there's about 170 districts actually in Texas that have engaged with teaching strategies in the past and used some of their products. Just want to clarify some of the ways that what we have through Texas Home Learning is a little bit different. I want to be clear that this situation is new. It's unheard of. It's absolutely unique. So this product is actually completely modified for Texas Home Learning and for what Texas districts are facing right now. It's a digital product again, so that's you have access to the Creative Curriculum Cloud, so the digital access absolutely free, digitally native, which is an incredible benefit. I want to be clear that there are some trade books that if the district does not, or the school or the teacher does not have, that would need to be purchased in order to use the program with full fidelity. And then also want to call out that there may be additional costs depending on how a district or a school would want to extend this offering. If they would want to extend it, again, that's a local decision, but we just want to be very clear about what is and what is not included in this offering. And then finally, the question that we get a ton all the time, we're in the middle of the school year this November, how can we get started? So again, this is based on how it fits the unique needs of you and your kids and your teachers. We're putting this out there as a resource, and folks can use all or none of the materials. It's completely optional. There's also one of the nice things about PreK Learning Solution for Texas is that it's built into different components and units that can be used in a little bit more customizable ways. So that is available for folks. We want to just be clear and acknowledge that this is the middle of the school year. This is not ideal. We would have much rather this conversation been happening in May of last year, but this is where we are, and we are still excited to make this solution available to folks in Texas. So with that, I want to go ahead and turn it over to Brienne, and I'm going to send it over to Brienne. Brienne, I am hoping that you have access.
Let's see.
It looks like you have access. So go ahead and take it over and welcome.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And I'm glad that I found a common fast talker in you, Andrew, getting to hear that presentation. So it's one thing I divulge before I start, that I talk awfully fast, but I'm so excited to be here. And as Andrew mentioned, my name is Brian. I'm our Vice President of Educational Content at Teaching Strategies, where I oversee instructional design of our curriculum, assessment, and professional development resources. And I'm so excited to have the opportunity to even build on those existing relationships that Andrew mentioned that we already have in Texas, but really elevate that to focus in on meeting some really specific needs of teachers in Texas and families in Texas right now. So to jump right in, let's make sure I can still click forward. Andrew, I'm clicking and it's not going. Oh, maybe it just takes another second. Okay, so today what we're going to look at is a collection of a few of our resources. We're going to take a look at the Creative Curriculum Cloud for Texas, which Andrew mentioned was specifically designed here to support the unique needs of where we find ourselves, not just in distance, but in this hybrid setting, right? Of not knowing exactly sure, sometimes even what tomorrow might look like in terms of what our classroom dynamics look like. We'll look at that comprehensive set of curriculum resources. We'll take a look at GOLD, which is our comprehensive whole child formative and summative assessment tool. And then we'll also take a look briefly at our professional development resources. Not sure what's happening. It's not, I just should be able to hit the arrow key, correct? I can't hear you if you're speaking, Andrew. Do I have to take control back again?
Yeah, it keeps jumping in and out. I'll just waiting for Brian to control your screen.
Yeah, I'm clicking things and arrows and nothing's happening. Do you want to stop share and I'll start share with the same deck, but from my end?
Let's try that.
Let's go this route. We're nothing if we're not flexible here in early childhood, right? That feels right. Does that look good? Okay, so then something just, Andrew already mentioned this, but I just wanted to reiterate, everything we're gonna look at today is available in English and Spanish. So through this deck, sometimes I'll show it in English, sometimes I'll show it in Spanish, but for the sake of time, I just wanted to say now, and we'll remind us throughout the piece, anything we're looking at, you'll be able to have access to in the tool, both between English and Spanish. As I already mentioned, the realities of early childhood are really different than even where we found ourselves a year ago. And for us to be most supportive of children and families, we have to be planning for every different possibility right now. And we're honored to be partners with teachers in Texas that are figuring that out right now, whether that be in classrooms, remote, hybrid, or anywhere along that continuum in the months ahead of us. Briefly, just a little bit about Teaching Strategies history. Early childhood is all we do. That's it. We are laser focused on those areas of birth through third grade. For over 4 decades, this has been our focus, starting out with curriculum resources in the late 70s to then evolving into the late 90s, having our first assessment, developmental continuum, iterations of curriculum over the years, led to us actually acquiring Ready Rosie, which Andrew mentioned earlier, a Texas-based company that's this comprehensive solution for family partnerships and engagement, to then all the way here in 2020 being set up to truly partner with TEA to deliver a really comprehensive solution for where you find yourselves now. And at the core of all 4 of those decades, what has remained consistent is this idea of really having a strong foundation in the whole child. And I think it's important that words thrown around a lot in terms of whole child, but really defining what does that mean for us. So at first, it's student-led inquiry through hands-on play-based learning, right? These are small learners. How we know they learn best is through hands-on play-based investigation. But that's not in trade-off of really strong skill-based focused, right? And that we can get to that skill and knowledge through differentiated, accelerated growth. Additionally, we're looking at social skill development in every interaction, not as an event or a prescribed lesson, but really weaving those social skills in every interaction and every experience, and knowing the rich importance of that investment. And then lastly, the seamless connection between home and school. That's always been a cornerstone of our work at Teaching Strategies, but I would say it's far more accelerated and higher on the priority list here recently. And I actually think it's one of the positive elements that may come from this whole COVID season is really a rethinking of what home to school connections look like and how we really are empowering educators and families to advocate and co-create some of this content and learning for their children's far beyond when we find ourselves in a remote setting. So when we think about a whole child foundation, we have to start with a base of objectives, right? What do children need to learn? At Teaching Strategies, we have 38 research-based objectives for development and learning, cover all of those areas of development: social, emotional, physical, cognitive, the content areas of literacy, math, science, technology. These are not the secret sauce though, right? These are research-based with a criterion referenced reports behind them. So it's no surprise that even before the adoption process, but now once reconfirmed through the proclamation process, have 100% alignment to Texas Prekindergarten guidelines. Also wasn't surprised to me that we both start with this idea of social skill development. And when we look at our objectives for development and learning, regulating behaviors, establishing positive relationships, participating cooperatively, that directly connects back to those areas in the Texas Prekindergarten guidelines. So in further webinars and implementation, we'll certainly dig a little deeper there, but wanted to let everyone know that there is that really strong connected 100% alignment there. And you'll see the Texas Prekindergarten guidelines woven throughout our solutions. So then the next step is when you think about what children need to learn, we're talking about how they develop and learn, right? So at Teaching Strategies, what I do say is a little more of that secret sauce is this progression of development and learning, birth through third grade. When we take a particular skill and we really unpack, what does this look like as children progress over time in their development? And these color bands represent a research-based, widely held expectation. So here in Texas, for the PreK solution, that's that blue color band. You'll see these color bands pop up a lot within our solutions. It kind of grounds you as a pre-kindergarten 4 teacher. That blue color band represents the research-based, widely held expectation aligned to Texas Prekindergarten guidelines. But we also know the reality is all of us as educators are serving children whose skills are below and above those widely held expectations. And we want to offer that visibility. And then also that long-term visibility into what this looks like to set that trajectory for future third grade school success. So how this plays out in an example would be something like our objective 20C, connecting numerals, aligned to the Texas Prekindergarten guideline around child recognizing one-digit numerals. You'll see here that aligns to our blue level 6 of identifying numerals up to 10. But then we know we may have children's skills who are below widely held expectation, or children's skills who are above. So our curriculum resources will be able to scaffold with that and allow you to really meaningfully individualize approach and instruction without having to juggle a lot of different standards lists and curriculum resources. The next component of that is thinking how these objectives and progressions really drive formative and summative assessment. There's a lot of resources and approaches and stances on formative versus summative, but it really is about the two coming together, right? Summative is important. That's some of our data stories, our growth stories. It informs long-term program improvement. But that summative assessment is only as strong as those daily interactions and in the moment organic, authentic realizations of children's development. So within GOLD, our assessment solution, the idea is to really bring those two together in a way that follows an assessment process for ongoing progress monitoring. We're observing and collecting facts. What do children know and can do? How do I document that? How do I associate that with Texas Prekindergarten guidelines and standards? How do I then think about that in a progression of development to find out where children's skills are related to widely held expectations? And then lastly, and most importantly, what am I doing with that information? How am I using it to inform my instruction, to enhance my conversations with families or work with other teaching partners? This is not This is not rocket science, right? This is just great teaching. This is showing up and being responsive to children, but we need to create tools and resources that allow teachers to more systematically gather the kind of information that he or she needs to successfully navigate through progress monitoring in a way that's informed. So to do that well, you can't just have an assessment solution that captures this kind of documentation and offers this kind of connections. You also need curriculum resources that are directly aligned to that. So that's what we'll spend the next little bit of time in, is briefly giving you a glimpse into what this comprehensive set of curricular resources look like that are directly connected to that assessment content. So we'll talk a little bit about studies and what those daily resources look like that you can add into your instruction. We'll talk about some planning tools and features digitally that can hopefully help work for you as an educator. And then we'll kind of round out with talking about some of that digital family sharing and communication. And I didn't mention already, Andrew, feel free to interrupt me if there's any questions that pop up that seem really timely. I know we've got some questions at the end, but it'll be a little hard for me to also watch that. So feel free to interrupt if needed.
Permission to interrupt. That's one of my favorite things. Thank you.
Awesome. So the first thing I really want to talk about to set a foundation here, and I think, Andrew, you said it perfectly, like, this is November. We absolutely acknowledge and know teachers have a plan. They've worked really, really hard on what that plan likely is. We are not, even as teaching strategies coming as a partners, expecting that teachers are just going to say, oh, I'm ready to take on this whole new perspective and approach. But I did want to take just a couple minutes to offer what this foundational approach is behind a lot of our resources so that teachers could start thinking about it and what that might look like. But then shortly after this, I'll get into some options of how you can still leverage these resources, even if you're not ready to start implementing studies. But briefly here, to give an overview, what studies are is this underlying thread woven throughout our daily plans and our teaching guides that really focus on project-based investigations of topics of things that are relevant to children's everyday lives. Boxes, water, wheels, music making, simple machines, gardening, these things that children already have prior knowledge to, that families already have prior knowledge of, where children have core concepts and ideas that they want to build from, ask their own questions and find answers to them, have big ideas, test them out, try again. And there's this commonality. It's not about sage on a stage of teaching something specifically, but opening up this place for children to really investigate and explore. What studies aren't is something more of those abstract concepts, right? Like dinosaurs or planets, or more of that thematic approach of like a letter of the week kind of thing. It's not saying those are inappropriate. As a former preschool teacher, I loved dinosaurs. Put them in the block area, sing dinosaur stomp. We're not saying dinosaurs are bad. We're just saying you can't really investigate a dinosaur. You can research one. You can't cut one in half. You can't eat one. You probably can't talk to someone who regularly works with dinosaurs. So we can't ever get to those really critical thinking, higher level process skills that we know children need to have for positive approaches to learning later, unless we give them the opportunity to drive a little bit more of their own learning based on their interests and persist over a topic over a longer period of time to drive that. And one of the other components that's really resonating more so now than ever with so many programs remote is the ability for families to so quickly participate in these study topics because every family member has experience with water and experience with boxes in their jobs, in their hobbies, in just their daily lives. So it also is showing even more so now than ever, real relevance for families to be able to participate in this kind of learning instead of maybe my 4-year-old coming home asking me a bunch of questions about dinosaurs that I can't, off the tip of my tongue, engage in a meaningful conversation around. So to get to these studies, as Andrew mentioned, all of this content is available digitally. In subsequent webinars, we'll dig into actual demos, but for the sake of time today, I've just pulled out some glimpses here. Here's where you can see all of those teaching guides that we created for Texas. So you'll see the list of study topics, boxes, gardening, music making, simple machines, water, and wheels. Those are your studies, your comprehensive daily plans that will feature those. But then there's also 2 additional studies that bookend that. The first 6 weeks, which I know is past the first 6 weeks of school, but there's a lot of rich content in here around building community and setting some expectations and rhythms and consistency with children. And then the last 4 weeks around transitioning to kindergarten and what that looks like for families and children to navigate and prepare for what will be new for kindergarten. Then within each of these teaching guides, you'll see at a high level and at a glance that will give a teacher a high level view of what's this week going to look like for all those major times of day. You can see here the Texas Prekindergarten guidelines are prominently displayed. These are a lot that get covered in a week when we're thinking about whole child open-ended instruction. From these investigations, children will be asking questions. This is an example from boxes, but what jobs involve boxes? What are the characteristics of boxes where we get into geometry and capacity and some really cool stuff? What do we know about boxes? What do we want to find out? That's where we start. We start with a web of big ideas. I often talk about wanting to give teachers their Sunday night back. And that's what this web and these daily plans are. This is your Sunday night back. This is the framework, the structure, those big ideas and concepts. But you can see here, even here on the web, there's lots of blanks. I want a teacher's planning time to be about how do I bring this concept to life for my classroom and the children that I serve and the families that are part of my community. How do I then take this to the next level to really make it mine and my classrooms? But always starting with those real authentic questions from children. As we're doing shared writing, as we're modeling those print concepts, that we're doing it coming from children's thoughts and ideas. And nothing sends a more positive message that you belong here than the instruction and the focus of the day being led by your ideas as young learners. Then in addition to those study components, we also have a set of daily resources that are going to focus a little bit more heavily on direct instruction and skill development. So studies is really child-led, really just facilitated by the teacher, but then we know there's a balance to that of times of day that are more direct instruction and more laser focused on specific skills. So there's over 200 of these intentional teaching experiences. These are often used in small group instruction, in classroom or virtually, developmentally appropriate steps of hands-on play-based experiences rooted in Texas state standards, as primary is always going to be the first, but then related objectives that you're likely also to influence and observe. But then here, in addition to Texas Prekindergarten guidelines, this toggle real-time into Spanish, you'll also see that children's names auto-populate on that teaching sequence. So if we go back to our assessment process and those color bands, every time a teacher is making an assessment decision in the system, that's real time populating where that child's name would show up along a teaching sequence anytime that objective is addressed in the future. And it's, if I do something tomorrow, again, and get a different piece of documentation, these children's names would continue to move. Individualizing instruction is the most important thing that we can do when thinking about our planning. We wanted to take as much of the heavy lift of that as we could. So if you're taking the time to invest preliminary ratings and formative assessment, you should be given instructional experiences that step's taken care of for you, of a suggestion of where along a teaching sequence to engage a child. But then you learn something new about Tiana in this interaction. She navigates it quickly. You right here have that scaffold right in front of you. You don't have to plan for next time. You don't have to research what that is. That next step to scaffold is right there in front of you. Something new we've done with the Texas Home Learning product and within Cloud is this idea then of family equivalence. It wasn't enough to have anymore, to have high quality experiences for teachers and children. We needed to be able to translate and take that home. So every one of these hundreds of intentional teaching experiences now has a family equivalent where we've taken that full activity, experience, and teaching sequence, consolidated it usually to 3 to 5 bullets. We've thought about materials that families have readily available at home, and we've kind of synthesized it to be really accessible for families. Again, a quick toggle from English to Spanish. But if I all of a sudden find myself remote, or even just want to reinforce something I did in the classroom, we play this great game together as a class. I want then a child to benefit from getting to play that game at home. Then I can send those steps for that to be replicated at home in both English and Spanish. Another daily resource you'll have access to are our Mighty Minutes. Every moment matters here, more so now than ever. And historically, in more of a classroom-based setting, these were thought to be for transitions and in between moments. So we don't just sing kind of some of those same songs over and over again. But we now also, in addition to the 135 English and Spanish versions of these, we also have family equivalents, where we've taken these songs, chants, and rhymes and written a family version of them. This is one time too to point out this transadaptive nature of our translation. Mega Minutos is a good example where we definitely don't ever just do a direct translation, right? We do a transadapted to make sure that the rhyming and the literacy approaches are accurate there, but also even changing the tune sometimes, right? If we're asking families to sing these at home in the bathtub or while they're going to walk the dog, we want them to be tunes that resonate with Spanish-speaking communities and families as well. Then the last, I forgot I had a visual of that. There you go. You can see the share with families in Spanish. The last component that I want to talk about of daily resources for the teacher is our children's book collection. So as Andrew mentioned, because this is a digital only solution where we don't have the print trade books as part of this collection, but of course we still needed to have literature and we needed to have great books for teachers to be sharing. So you'll also have a digital library of a lot of nonfiction and then some of those kind of public domain folk tales to be sharing with children. Each study topic has its own dedicated nonfiction in English and Spanish. And we've seen some great success in classrooms on whiteboards where children can come up and kind of draw on and interact with, as well as virtually to be able to dig in and look at some of this imagery together, even in a remote setting. So all of these pieces that we just talked about, through our digital planning tool, a teacher can come into the system, decide to add a study. She'll see a collection, or he will see a collection of what those study topics are. This teacher is adding boxes. Then what's happened with that click is their daily planning tool is pre-populated with all those major times of day. So it's going to give the question of the day, facilitation notes for our small group discussion here of this intentional teaching experience. We'll put that Mighty Minute in there. It really can comprehensively give you a plan, but every element of that is editable too, right? So if you want to swap out what that Mighty Minute is or swap out that intentional teaching experience, add an additional read aloud. It's a dynamic tool that we'll dig further into in other training, but that can really work for you. That being said, as we've talked about a couple times, we know not every teacher is going to want to just say, I'm going to start boxes on January 1. Let me add that to my plan. We also wanted to have the opportunity for you to just search for individual aspects of what I've talked about today based on what you need most. So if you're looking for more songs, chants, and rhymes to send home to family members, right? And that's all you really need right now. That's your biggest problem, is that families are asking for that kind of content. You'll also be able to come into the system and just search for discrete activities. So I can go in here, add an activity. I see my Texas Prekindergarten guidelines. I navigate to literacy. I'm going to take a look at phonological awareness, specifically related to rhyming. And when I select that, I'm going to be prompted with a collection of those Mighty Minutes and intentional teaching experience, both the teacher version, the family version, the English, the Spanish. Will be presented with those to either add to my plan, directly share with families, or just real-time use in my instruction. So we really, in partnership with the Texas Home Learning team, really wanted to think about what were the ways that this content could flex. And we'll continue to hear your feedback and think about ways through our ongoing kind of webinars and launch of this, how we can most directly support that. The last element to speak about, to show you here digitally, is this connection with families, right? More important now than ever. And again, with that same kind of commitment of giving teachers their Sunday nights back whenever possible. I wanted to have all that dynamic planning that we just looked at, that teachers can have complete control over what goes on the plan, what gets shared with families. Not every teacher has time for that or bandwidth for that, especially right now. So what you'll also get in the system is 180 days of at-home guided learning plans that are already done for you for families that follow the same cadence and sequencing and spiraling of our teacher daily plans, but all rewritten to be family facing. We didn't want to just slap 4 parents on the cover of our daily plans, but really go back and revisiting that. So every day has 4 components, something related to the investigation. So families can carry on their own investigation of boxes or water, a guided learning experience that will mirror whatever that small group direct instruction would have been, a mighty minute, a song, chant, or rhyme that would have been used in that day's instruction, as well as a something to consider, which is really just a parenting tip related to positive guidance strategies or child development insights, things that we know children would have been exposed to if they had been in the classroom setting full time. So while we rapidly created this to help support this distance learning solution, what I think has been really interesting is to look at this actually long-term replaces maybe that 24 grid plan that we post out in the hallway or send home in the newsletter that was just this high level commercial of what was happening, that even if my daughter were going to school full time, it would still be really great to get some insight into the words to the song that she sang and the investigation questions that were asked and how we could do that. So while this is a direct play to support distance learning, those of you that find yourself in classroom could still find some great benefit to just elevating what kind of content we're sharing home with families. And then the last piece I'll mention here is the study component and that more kind of skill-based experience. They both have a prompt to send some documentation back. As a former teacher and director, I get really excited the idea of more communication back and forth. But then as a director, I get excited about that. As a teacher, I get kind of overwhelmed of the idea that 20 different families interpretation of what I want to be learning. And not that it's not all meaningful, but it's a lot to sift through and prioritize and make sense of. So our hope is by giving some prompts daily to families of things to be looking for, something to maybe to take a photo of and share back with families, it starts to cull down the kinds of content that teachers are getting back from families and help to prompt a family to be prepared to talk about certain areas of development on one-on-one conferences or check-ins. And now that leads into our partnership with families in this two-way communication tool where teachers and families can engage in two-way back and forth, like instant messaging conversations almost, while at the same time inserting these mighty minutes, these guided learning experiences, these at-home guided learning plans. So in one spot, mom, abuela, brother, dad, whoever is, leading that learning at home, or multiple, you can invite multiple family members to be part of this. But it's not just about teachers sending to families, it's also about families sharing back. So any photo that a family were to send back, I can, at a click of a button, create documentation to have that then live in that child's portfolio. So we know there's much more of a shared responsibility now and the benefits we can have of learning some of that from families. So if we take a look at the rubric that Andrew outlined for us at the beginning of the call, we've taken a look at what those daily plans look like at a big picture, but then also just what individual experiences and how you could access them to meet some immediate needs. Teacher, family, supports, everything having sort of that family equivalent in both English and Spanish. Everything family facing, being able to be printable, this accessibility for all learners, not only English language learners and dual language learners, but also this idea of individualizing that instruction along that progression. And then kind of rounding out with where we started around how when you have all of those things in place, you're able to still maintain formative and summative assessment that's valuable and valid, even if you're having this flexible environment where instruction is taking place. So the last piece would be you can have all the resources in the world to deliver on these rubrics, but if you don't invest in the professional development, it's only going to take you so far. So one of the things I was excited to see in partnering with TEA and the Texas Home Learning team was really thinking about needing to make an investment in the pre-kindergarten teams to really have access to real-time, robust professional development. So there are specific course at the beginning of this, you can see here, specifically for Texas and what these Texas resources look like. But then there's hundreds of hours of just best practice in early childhood in here as well. Things like challenging behaviors, things like getting started with studies, partnering with families, other big topics that may be front of mind, as well as dedicated content for administrators as well, and how they can leverage some of these tools and resources. So in addition to having continued partnership with the team here on the phone for some additional webinars, some additional kind of webinars we'll offer just as partners in the field for the state of Texas, also know that part of this offering is that rich online professional development as well. And then the last piece I would just say is this reminder, if I can get to my last slide, is this reminder that we looked at a lot today. I think I talked even faster than you, Andrew. I think I got you beat. That was a lot to cover in 30 minutes. But what I want you to take away from this is not a sense of overwhelmed, but a sense of there's a lot here that hopefully could solve some of your most immediate needs. And we want to be your partners to get some of those immediate needs addressed and focused and get you supported. And then over time, hope that you can build in to find how some of these other resources start to work off of each other and start to play into what some of those less immediate, but still really important student and family objectives are and how you can customize them to work for you. So the last piece I would just say, I think Andrew's going to wrap up with some next steps, but just know that we also have a dedicated Teaching Strategies Texas page where the THL page will take you to. Is probably the easiest way to get there. But here you'll find us dig quite a bit deeper into a lot of the content I talked about today, but can also see some other webinars and other times we've talked about some of these approaches and solutions. If before we release materials, you wanted to dig in a little bit more. So with that, Andrew, I'll kick it back to you. So I'll stop share so you can share.
Well, thank you so much, Brian. Let me actually, do you mind just pulling back up the deck and just click into that final slide?
Yeah.
Suspense.
There we go.
Oh, okay. Well, this is a great slide because it centers on the reason why we're all here, but want to leave y'all in with what's coming next on the next slide, actually, Brian, if you don't mind. So in terms of our next steps from today, what y'all can do, what's available right now, go to texashomeLearning.org, and you'll see that you can either access this information two ways. One is you can go in by subject. The other is you can go in by grade level. And so you'll be able to see the pre-K, the integrated PreK Learning Solution there. So you can start to actually explore some sample materials that are available. You can also click through there to go to the Texas, to the PreK Learning Solution landing page that the Teaching Strategies team has put together. So you can click through there and learn a little bit more. Wanted to give you a heads up. So there will be then a lot of good questions about when will this be available? When can I use this? When can we dig into the full content? So that's going to be on December 15th. So you'll see there's a webinar, same time as this one. It'll be at 1 o'clock, and we actually were able to get the registration up and running today. So if you are looking at this webinar, you can go ahead and actually go to that bit.ly right there. Just type that in. You should be able to access the registration for that webinar. And you can also get access to it through texashomeLearning.org. And then finally, and this will follow that materials release webinar, there will be other implementation training series. This also includes kind of a getting started webinar that we'll run with Brian and her team to give you kind of more of an in-depth walkthrough of the materials, but then also an implementation series that will be run by Brian's team that is completely free to Texas educators interested in using this product that you can engage with. And so I think our final ask here is to stay up to date. And one way that you can do that is signing up for our newsletter. It's if you go to texashomeLearning.org and then you look in the top right of the website. It says stay updated, and you can choose to sign up for our newsletters, and we'll push all information about webinars and materials release. We'll push that to you on a weekly basis through a newsletter, just to make sure that you have any information that you need to make upcoming decisions. So with that, Brian, unless you have anything else, would love to just spend the last 9 minutes going over some of the questions that we've got in the chat. Does that seem okay?
Yeah.
So I think we were able to answer quite a few of the questions that were going that happened over the course of the webinar. As y'all saw me just kind of doing this thing, trying to respond to those with some of my teammates, but pulled out a few of the bigger questions that I think are on a lot of people's minds. I think before we go into those, again, TexasHomeLearning.org is your source for all of this information. So go there. This webinar is being recorded, and we'll post the recording on TexasHomeLearning.org. We'll also post these slides too. So if you want to reference something that you saw in the slides, go back to them. That's an option for you as well. So Brian, if you don't mind, one of the questions that we got from folks that I think you went over, but would love to just talk about it really quick once again. Can you tell us what is all included in this PreK Learning Solution within this Texas Home Learning offering specifically?
Yeah. So it's kind of three key elements. The first is the GOLD assessment solution. So our comprehensive formative and summative assessment. So the ability to build children's portfolios, all of the reporting that comes with that, which of course we need to make far deeper in further webinars, but it is it's the most widely used early childhood assessment solution. So all of the components that go with that around checkpoint monitoring and digital portfolios and family communication. The second element would be the comprehensive set of curriculum resources. So it's over 180 days of daily plans with then over 230, I believe, intentional teaching experiences for small group, over 138 Mighty Minutes for transitions, the digital library of, I think, probably around 15 or 20 children's books that we have in this particular collection, as well as all the family equivalents and those 180 at-home guided learning plans that go along with that, and that digital planning tool. And then the third component would be that online professional development. And I did see one question around Spanish related to that in there too. So that's the one element of the tool that we don't have comprehensive parity in Spanish because it's not family facing at all. So anything that could ever be family facing is always also available in Spanish. Our PD continues to grow in Spanish. There are some courses that we have available in Spanish, but those that full collection of our online professional development library is also included.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So I want to make sure that you have a chance to look through the Q&A as well and answer any questions that you think are particularly important for the Texas PreK Learning Solution.
Yeah, there's some that I think might be a little bit more specific to Texas that I need to do a little homework on to understand a little bit better before I can answer. So
I think there's just real quick to let you off the hook on that one. We were so excited to get you all this information that we're building this and we're developing it. On December 15th, we'll be able to actually show folks the product. And so I think a lot of questions will also be answered then. And also thank you to folks in the crowd for giving us grace on that. Again, we wanted to make sure we get all the available information out as early as we could, but also still recognizing that we don't have all the answers yet. So thank you all in advance for the grace.
One question I do see, Andrew, that I know I can answer is it's asking if family support materials are only available digitally. I probably didn't drive that home enough. So no, everything is available digitally, but everything family facing is printable. So we know the realities of many programs are still putting together the packets to go home with food or to drop off once a week at resource centers, whatever that may be for your program. Anything family facing, you have the ability to be able to print.
Excellent. I think that just want to be clear. So this is a digitally native product, but folks, y'all have the ability to print these as you see fit as well from a browser. So any kind of printing is all extra. It's not included. We can't pay for everybody's printing costs, but it is all printable, as Brian mentioned. and ready for y'all to be able to deliver that in the best way that meets the needs of your families or teachers or students. Fran, we did get a question previously about, I think the question was, are we able to see how we can use the Texas PreK Learning Solution to meet the needs of all learners to essentially differentiate for folks? I know the answer is probably not yet on seeing within the solution itself, but I don't know if you'd be able to speak through how a teacher would be able to use y'all's materials to be able to support all learners.
Yeah, so I think, it's something that when we have a little bit more time, we certainly will. I'm just going to go back a few slides here. We'll certainly want to dig much deeper into those kinds of topics in more implementation style webinars. But even just looking here at an intentional teaching experience, this is in Spanish, which I can't read, but maybe some of you on the phone can, but I know the idea of what we're saying here. This, I think, is one of the clearest examples, right? So we're taking something like a tongue twister experience, straw shapes, sorting and classifying, whatever that may be. Like I said, there's hundreds of them. And they're developmentally appropriate is the first step of just being age appropriate and focused on the skills aligned to the Texas Prekindergarten guidelines. But to truly to be developmentally appropriate, they have to be individualized, right? We have to know how to take this tongue twister game or the straw shapes game and individualize that. And we give visibility to every teacher of that color band, red all the way through purple. So basically, we're looking at ways to individualize this experience for a child whose skills really mirror that of a typically developing infant versus, and sometimes that's just engaged with the materials, right? But we know the reality is a lot of children may be demonstrating skills at that orange or yellow color band. Instead of teachers needing to plan for separate different experiences, we still want to have those heterogeneous groups of children that come together in small group, virtually or in person, because we know there's great benefit to those children being exposed to the same content together and learning from each other. This is a way that real time a teacher could individualize some of the prompts and questions that she's asking or the materials that he's providing to children to differentiate kind of more there in the moment. So I think this is like the clearest example of how we try and support that. But then there's lots of other things, right? Even if we think about the language we use in our progressions and in any family-facing content is always strengths-based, and it's always talking about where children's skills are now and where they're going next. It's not a checklist or rubric of whether a child can or can't do something. Every child's skills are along this progression somewhere, and it doesn't really often matter in that conversation, in that moment of where on the progression. It's about what's the child doing now, what's next. Here's the resources a teacher has, here's the resources a family has to really help support growth across there. Then there's other things within the assessment system that also can individually support. And not just children with disabilities or special needs, but if we think about including all children across the board, we think about advanced learners and our same commitment to make sure they're still seeing growth too, not just that they've hit a certain standard expectation and whew, they're moving on. We need to have that same level of commitment of growth for every child. We also have, you can't really see it here, but in each of these intentional teaching experiences, there's also an including all children breakout here, which gives some suggestions. We worked with specialists in dual language learning and special education to suggest different adaptations or modifications for every one of these activities to have all children be most successful, as well as within our teaching guide daily plans, we have suggestions for including all children referenced throughout every day's instruction.
Thank you so much, Brianne. And thank you, everybody. We are at time. So I want to leave you just with a few things in the chat. You'll see one is a link, and it was my fault that I made the bit.ly. I was the one that made the wrong bit.ly. I will take the fault. But the new, an updated link to sign up for the newsletter is in the chat. The second thing is another reminder, visit texhomeLearning.org. And you'll see all the updates there. And then also any questions, please reach out to us at texasHomeLearning@ta.texas.gov. Again, thank you all so much for taking time out of your day to be with us to learn about this great resource that we're excited to be able to provide. And we hope that it does save you time and energy, and gives the Sundays back to teachers, as Brianne mentioned a few times. Brianne, thank you so much for being here as well. Everybody have a wonderful rest of your week.
Bye. Thank you so much.